Hey, how's everybody doing? Welcome to the Irish in the Industry podcast. This is episode 2. So happy that you are tuning in and taking the time to join us today. I'm your host. My name is Doug Sioka. I'm a 1993 graduate of Our Lady's University. I'm the founder and CEO of Kavar Capital Partners in Leawood, Kansas. I've been employed in the dynamic wealth management industry for my entire career, 33 years and counting. And as the kids say, still obsessed. Actually, the kids would say low-key, obsessed, bruh. So that's me. And just as a reminder, since this is only our second episode, the goals of this podcast are threefold. Okay, number one, we want to connect with impactful people in the wealth management industry that also have a connection to the University of Notre Dame. Number two, we want to elevate the understanding of the opportunities and the challenges and really the ever-changing landscape of the wealth management industry for the next generation of wealth managers. And number three, we want to have some fun, right? We want to share some stories. We want to engender some goodwill that hopefully will resonate throughout the wealth management community. Look, working in this industry is fantastic. It's been around forever, but the adaptation to being more comprehensive, process-oriented problem solvers who deal with high net worth clients, that's still very much in its infancy, but man, this baby is growing up fast, right? This is a profession that has job satisfaction rankings that are an outlier to other industries. And frankly, the generational replacement prospects for young people is just huge. So to recap, we're here to educate, we're here to elevate, and we're here to ruminate. So let's get after it, okay? And with me today, and I am so flattered that he's taken the time to be so, is Mike LaMena. Mike is the Chief Executive Officer at WealthSpire. WealthSpire is an independent financial firm that serves clients across the wealth, institutional, and retirement channels. Collectively, the organization manages or advises on more than $580 billion of assets and is a major leader in the independent space. Mike has held the CEO role since 2019. Prior to joining WealthSpire, Mike held very big positions as Chief Operating Officer and President at Bromfin Rothschild, Chief Operating Officer and President at Hightower, and Executive Director at Morgan Stanley. He's a 1995 graduate at the University of Notre Dame. So young, just a kid, and yet still so mature.
I still feel like a kid, but I'm not.
Mike resides in Long Island, New York. His experience is as cool and as fascinating as he is, and I'm so pumped to welcome you, Mike. Thank you again for taking the time to be with us on the Irish in the Industry podcast.
Well, it's awesome to be here. I know you're incredibly successful in the wealth management space, but you could have had a parallel career in the hype industry. I mean, you just get me fired up.
I think the bar's lower in the hype industry, yes, for the actual clients. We have a ton to talk about today. Yeah. And I think just look as a little shout out or homage to the most recently newly minted graduates in South Bend. Let's talk about your professional existence since you left South Bend. Like I said, 31 years ago. I mean, that doesn't make you feel as young as it did a second ago. But you left Notre Dame and you actually did a stint as a volunteer educator at a school called Mount St. Michael Academy in the Bronx.
That's correct.
What an incredibly selfless and cool endeavor at that age. I'd like to know what was behind that decision making, and then ultimately what got you onto the launch pad in the wealth management business.
Yeah, well, I think you and I just figured out we both grew up in upstate New York.
Sure.
So I was very fortunate to go to Notre Dame. I didn't have any legacy connections. I think when I arrived there, I was shocked how many people had an uncle, a brother, a sister, an aunt, a cousin.
Yeah.
So I was first gen, and was fortunate to have financial support that enabled me to attend the university. Over the course of 4 years, I learned so much, met amazing people, and as I got deeper into my senior year, I had a desire to give back, and I wasn't sure exactly how that would manifest itself. Okay. Ultimately, I think Notre Dame had just launched the ACE program.
Okay.
And I had a few friends that were exploring that program, and I got connected to the Marist Brothers program, which was a 1-year commitment.
Okay.
Teaching in schools in New York and the Bronx or Manhattan. And, for me, I had an interest in education. I had a number of family members that were teachers. So everything kind of came together to say, before I commit to, adult life,
Right.
Let me do a year of volunteer work and have impact on lives and give back, given how fortunate I felt to have had the opportunity to attend Notre Dame. So I actually went from Notre Dame to living in a converted convent in the North Bronx with 3 religious marist brothers, another volunteer from Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Taught 4 classes of English, coached soccer, just had an amazing experience. The impact that you could see tangibly every day on the lives of the kids that we were working with was fantastic.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, I guarantee you they still remember you and the impact you had on them. Such a powerful time at their age to connect with someone who's just not that much their senior, who's setting such a great example on the selfless contribution they're willing to make to society. And I just love that it was such a big part of your soul when you left South Bend. So
whatever I gave to the program, I got a lot more just in terms of the experience. I remember sitting there and recognizing that kids did not want to leave the school, and it was because it was the place of stability in their lives. And when you have that shift in perspective, I didn't grow up wealthy, but I grew up in the suburbs in Syracuse, New York. So it was a radically different view of and I remember teaching Robert Frost's poem Mending Wall, and a lot of the kids just didn't have a visual reference for the typical colonial stone wall reference in the poem. So I hope I had a lot of positive impact on the lives of the kids that I worked with. I think I did. But I learned so much more about them, about myself. And it really, in a lot of ways, led me down the path that my career has taken since.
Right. Well, and in good segue, because so you leave the university with an arts and letters degree, which is Notre Dame's equivalent to liberal arts, and you studied English, then you were teaching. And so something happened between then and now where you're running a $580 billion investment advisory firm. So what was that next step that took you from the non-for-profit educational sector into the for-profit wild world of Wall Street?
Yeah, it is kind of a wild story, but it all makes sense when you pull back the lens and connect the dots. So, when I was very young, I was always extremely jealous of kids that knew exactly what they wanted to be. They wanted to be a doctor, an attorney, firefighter, whatever it was, they had clarity. I always saw a multiplicity of opportunities. And during that year, volunteering as a teacher, incredible experiences. I learned a lot, but I had a perspective that I was going to struggle over the long haul because I didn't perceive it to be a meritocracy. And I have deep respect for educators, teachers. They do amazing work. But personally, I felt like I was going to struggle a little bit, that I could be the best teacher in the building, and it wasn't going to necessarily translate to opportunity, economics, whatever it was. So I said, before I commit to teaching as a career, I need to find an experience that's more merit-based. So I had a college roommate of mine that had graduated and gotten a job at Morgan Stanley.
Okay.
He introduced me to some folks. I had preliminary conversations, and I didn't have the typical background. So I got a temp job, not a full-time position, a temp job, and at Morgan Stanley in their private wealth management business. And after a month or so, they gave me a full-time position as an entry-level analyst working with one of the top advisor teams in their private client business. And I found,
you obviously earned into that. Not to interrupt you, but to your point about gravitating toward a meritocracy, to receive an offer of conditional employment, and then within a month be like, yeah, this young man needs to be on scholarship. We need him on our team. I mean, what transpired during that month? Was it just, hey, I worked my head off, 90% of life just showing up, I was always there, or it just was very intuitive and you connected with your mentors and allies within the organization? Like, what took place that got you on such a quick?
I think it was the work ethic, my willingness to ask good questions, be curious, learn. I remember the person I initially interviewed with, she was a BC grad, and when she heard about the work I was doing in the school, she's like, how can I take you away from God's work to do this? And I'm like, well, and I gave my explanation for what I was trying to look for. And, I think I just demonstrated that, I was going to put the effort in, and I was intellectually curious to make up for whatever deficiency I had in terms of the technical knowledge with, hard work. And what I didn't realize at the time was that I would fall in love with the wealth management industry. So my first couple of years were working for an advisor team, directly client-facing, working with high net worth, ultra high net worth individuals. The advisor I was working with was also managing investment strategies.
Nice.
So I made myself an expert, and at the time it was AMR compliance. Now it's GIPS compliance.
Right.
Didn't have the background in it. Got the book, made myself an expert. But I had broad exposure to both kind of the wealth management and asset management side of the business. And then fortunately for me, a couple years into that, I had the opportunity to work with some application developers to automate stuff that I was doing manually in Excel.
Okay.
And through that experience, the light bulb just went off for me that I thought I could have the biggest impact on the organization by tapping into the fact that I seemed to have an ability to understand what the business was trying to achieve, be able to work with application developers, operators to build solutions,
okay,
and ultimately operationalize that.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed being in that, I call it universal translator role. I didn't have the technical expertise of the technologist. I didn't have necessarily the depth of investment expertise as some of the investment folks or the financial planners, but I had the ability to kind of listen, understand, synthesize, and translate between different groups, get everybody aligned around what we were trying to achieve, and drive execution. So I actually moved from the front office side to the back office side. And the advisor I was working with, I remember at the time, said, Mike, people don't do that.
That's right, very
they get the job in ops to be able to move to the front office side. And for me, I followed my heart. I followed my passion. I saw that that's where I got really excited.
Right.
And over the course of working in the industry 30 years, I've counseled a lot of people that, like, you can, if you're a disciplined person, kind of will yourself to pour in the hours and the effort to drive results over short periods of time. But if you want it to be truly sustainable, it's got to come from a place of passion, of genuine, authentic interest. So I actually moved into a space, middle office, back office, did everything from clearance and settlement and client reporting, managing client reporting systems and mutual fund ops and alternative investment operations and insurance ops, you name it.
You saw the whole matrix.
Did it, all of that.
Yeah.
And that was incredibly formative. And then, if I look at 2008, Morgan Stanley asked me to move to Hong Kong. They were looking to move their wealth management business, private client business in Asia from a broker-dealer structure based on their institutional back end, build a booking center in Singapore, rolling up to a Swiss bank they owned in Europe, and really just build a new platform, organizational structure, everything from the ground up. You'll remember this, 2008, unfortunately, financial crisis.
You're crossing the Occupy Wall Street picket lines to get on a plane to get the heck out of New York. Not a bad time to craft that off-ramp.
Yeah, and Asia at the time, everybody was like, Asia's the future. But unfortunately, after 9 months of 80-hour plus weeks and relentless effort, Morgan Stanley's perspective started to shift. They asked me to actually come back to the U.S., so the 3 to 4 year expat assignment ended up getting truncated. And when I left Hong Kong, I was deeply appreciative of the experience because it truly got me outside my comfort zone and allowed me to grow professionally in some amazing ways. But there are two things I couldn't shake. One, for the first time in my career, I was given a blank sheet of paper. Build the optimal business from the ground up, not renovate existing mainframe systems or deal with legacy issues, obstacles, constraints. Blank sheet of paper, build the ideal model for advisors to serve clients in an impactful way. So I was bitten by the entrepreneurial bug to do that. And I also saw that there was so much innovation, so much development occurring outside of the large established wirehouse firms. And that was technology, it was investments. And so I came back to the US and just knew I had to do something different. And I ended up moving from Morgan Stanley. It was the only company I'd really worked at after teaching. So it was a big leap, like leaving a well-established global bank. And I joined effectively a raw startup in Hightower early in their stages. I missed the kind of raw startup phase. They needed to have somebody to come in and really be the operating leader. They had a dynamic, charismatic founder who had a grand vision, but they needed to pair that with somebody who could drive execution across people, process, technology. And I had a kind of long track record of doing that. And I was at Hightower 7.5 years, did amazing things. I think we were on the front edge of this major evolution of the independent wealth space.
You guys basically created the concept. I mean, to go out and find companies that could offer scale and shared sort of holdco resources, but still retain entrepreneurial components in how people are running their business, which has become a modern day adaptation of the PE model. So going back to was the founder Phil Purcell back in?
Phil was one of the people that backed it. The CEO was Elliot Weisbluth, and he had a grand vision, was dynamic, charismatic, and we accomplished a lot together. I'm very proud of the work we did there, but ultimately, I ended up leaving Hightower to join Brofman Rothschild because I saw one. I thought professionally I was ready to be the CEO and really define the strategic plan myself, as opposed to being the execution person driving someone else's vision. And two, what attracted me to Brofman Rothschild at the time was a much more integrated model. Because at Hightower we had recruited a lot of teams from wirehouses. A little bit more of the of the identity was at the team level.
Okay.
And Brofman was a much more a fully integrated enterprise model. I joined there with the idea that nothing was longer term than the Brofman Rothschild family commitment to that business. 18 months later, they ended up selling the business to a firm that was a wholly owned subsidiary of NFP. And that kind of started my career leading kind of what used to be Wellspire Advisors under NFP's ownership.
Okay. So. Yeah, I mean, I go back to your point about trailblazing pioneer being Hightower. NFP, maybe a little bit before. If you remember, I believe their first CEO is Jessica Biblowitz, who was Sandy Weil's daughter. And once Jamie Dimon took her position within the hierarchy of Citi, she ended up starting NFP. They raised public funds. So they were very much out of the forefront with a lot of dough to spend.
100%.
So yeah, that's interesting to see how those two came together. That became Wellspire. That it was.
I always tell people it is a small industry, and when you start to pull on threads, like the connectivity is everywhere. But NFP had been able to go from a public company to a private company, directly backed by Madison Dearborn, and they started to build scale in a number of different verticals, and that was retirement planning services, and it was private client businesses and insurance, property casualty, life insurance, corporate benefits. They were probably better known as an insurance brokerage industry, but in 2019, when we combined Brofman Rothschild, the firm that I had been leading, with a firm that NFP owned, Sontag Advisory, that was really the start of this journey of scaling kind of the private client wealth business within NFP. And they were fantastic partners. They supported the business. They saw the opportunity to create scale, invest that scale and capacity to expand the client service deliverable, because they had done it on the insurance brokerage side.
For sure.
And they saw that a fully integrated model was going to be, one, the most valued, and two, the most capable of really advancing the client experience in the way that you want to do. So they were fantastic partners, and I expected to work for them for a long period of time. After 13 years of Madison Dearborn backing them, they ended up selling NFP to Aon. And Aon really bought NFP for scale in the middle market insurance business. I'm not sure they fully appreciated the kind of depth, breadth, quality of kind of individual and institutional wealth businesses that were part of NFP. So after a year of being asked a lot of intellectually curious questions about the business and exploring possibilities, I give Aon and NFP a lot of credit. The investment thesis they had was scale in the middle market insurance space. They weren't going to deploy capital and really allow these businesses to reach their full potential, because it's just not where they were going to allocate capital. So last year they allowed us to go down the path of exploring carving those businesses out. So that was Wellspire and 4 other sister businesses in the individual, institutional, and business management space. We pulled those 5 businesses together, and now we're, you quoted a couple statistics, but $580 billion in assets under advisement and management, 1,300 people, 45 offices, U.S., Canada, UK. I feel like we have the full portfolio of capabilities that the large national scaling firms are all trying to assemble. Right? We've got DC, DB, foundation, endowment. We have 400 people in the business management space doing high-end, tax preparation for athletes, entertainers, business executives, financial lifestyle concierge capabilities. We've got a trust company. We've got family office capabilities. So I feel like the full complement of capabilities we have. Now the opportunity is to increasingly just simplify the brand story and be able to deliver more in an integrated way to clients. In the past, it felt clunky because there was multiple brands.
Well, I'm going to go back to that. It's a really important point. We talk about a specialist versus a generalist when we incorporate the outlook for the industry. But I want to go back. One thing you mentioned earlier, and remind you said you felt like you were a universal translator. Something. I missed the third word. University translator. So you know what they would call you today? Agentic. Right? That is the concept. So maybe the first L in LLM is LaMena. Because you were basically creating a large language model. Like you were getting front and back office assistants to communicate at a time where you knew the value was in the data. Because only if you incorporate the data in such a fashion of a comprehensive nature can you deliver to client across this full suite of what we now know are their identifiable needs to have a really solid wealth plan.
I mean, I think that's it. So there are these threads of commonality when you look at, like, you know, in my career, and I think any advisor, right? Like, the industry is so specialized in terms of unique capabilities and the depth that we go to: financial planning, trust and estate planning, investments, alternatives, trust capabilities. You can't be an expert in everything. So you have to embrace this role that, you know, my view is we do a great job of building deep, trusted relationships with our clients, whether they're individuals, families, institutions. We go super deep and understand, what are they trying to achieve? What are their goals, objectives, fears, concerns, risks? What matters most to them?
Right.
And then use all of this capability that we can bring together, that we can synthesize, coordinate, to be able to drive impact aligned with what they want to achieve. How do you help people live their best, most impactful, purposeful life? How do you help a foundation and endowment in their mission to do whatever it is they want to do in the world to positively impact people's lives? How do we help employers have great retirement solutions that don't have just great governance and investment mandate, you know, investment platforms, but also help achieve great outcomes for plan participants? So, like, on the surface, sometimes people look at it and say, well, do all these businesses, are they truly complementary? There is a consistency. And I think in my career, like, I've loved being in that space where you're surrounded by all these deep subject matter experts, specialists, the unique connective tissue.
No question.
So I often think that, you know, some people say, well, what did liberal arts education at Notre Dame, you know, provide you? And I think that ability to communicate verbally and writing, synthesize data, be the connective tissue, right? Recognize, and you and I both recognize throughout your career, there's like critical mentors. And, you know, there's a guy at Morgan Stanley, I work with, Jerry Camara, and I remember he asked me to take over clearance and settlement at Morgan Stanley. And when I first showed up, it took me about 5 minutes to recognize that there were people that had been in the cage doing clearance and settlement at Morgan Stanley for 35, 40 years.
Right.
I was by far the least knowledgeable person relative to any technical element of what the teams actually did on a day-to-day basis. And I had to face the reality that Jerry asked me to go into that role to lead that function, not because I was a subject matter expert, right?
Right.
But because I could align people around a common vision, bring people together culturally, establish that. And it was actually, in hindsight, an absolutely critical inflection point in my career, because it allowed me to let go of feeling like I had to be the deepest subject matter expert in the room on a topic, and that what I was being asked to do was to play a leadership role that was about, how do you build a team? How do you align people around objectives? How do you create focus? How do you help people prioritize? How do you work on professional development? And that was pretty critical, just like the move to, you know, Hong Kong. When I went to Hong Kong, literally and figuratively, all the relationships that I had established in the U.S. were gone. I was literally and figuratively dropped into a foreign environment and had to thrive in a new space and forge new relationships. And I think I've found that every time you get pushed outside your comfort zone like that, that's where real growth occurs.
Oh, I completely agree, Mike. And I love the concept of connective tissue. I would take it further when you were talking about just bringing people in this symbiosis you're creating as a leader. It's culture and choreography, right? And we always use this little silly analogy when we talk about financial planning that weaves in all the disparate aspects. Is life has it's like a playbook for Notre Dame football. You've got this many scripted plays and this many audibles, because life happens along the way, right? So you have to be able to think and be very quick on your feet, making sure you're pulling in the right audible at the right time to improve the optimization of your outcomes and win those games. So choreography resonates with me when I think about you, because what I learned about you is at the University of Notre Dame, you did, to your point, step out of your comfort zone. Yeah. Took a class in Shakespeare that turned into some roles in Shakespeare productions on campus, which I have to say I admire even more than so much of it I already admire about you, to put yourself out there in that capacity, even to understand what you're trying to say in reading Shakespearean literature. But when you think about that, like, that had to be such a rewarding endeavor for sort of crafting your ability to be a good culture choreographer, stepping out of your comfort zone, but bringing together an incredibly successful production. Do you still think about that as a pivotal moment in your growth?
Yeah, I do for a couple different reasons. One, I mean, the genesis was, as a freshman, I took a great British literature class with Professor Paul Rathburn, and he was just dynamic and engaging, and I just loved him as a professor. Yeah. And towards the end of that class, it was spring semester, he said that he ran a class, Shakespeare and Performance, and the whole idea was, if you were actually going to get up on your feet and perform Shakespeare, you would really take the time to understand the words at a granular level. And I liked him so much as a professor, I said, absolutely, I'm going to take this class. He said it's a great class, it's in high demand. I'm going to do all summer. I was like, what did I do? Like, I'm going to get up.
Right.
I didn't have any background in that. And, early on there was anxious moments and,
sure.
There was fear and concern. But I did find that the thesis played out, that you got a deeper understanding of the language if you were going to get on your feet and actually act out scenes. And I fell in love with it. And I think that's one of the things that, when you think about liberal arts in a place like Notre Dame, they give you that space to explore. You're not the same person when you graduate that you are when you come in. Some of the values are going to be consistent, but Notre Dame was a phenomenal place that allowed me to explore, mature, evolve, and I fell in love with it. I had little idea when I signed up for the first course. I talked to Professor Rathburn after the first semester. I said, Shakespeare wrote a lot of stuff. Maybe we should have a second semester. We ended up having a second semester. John McLeod, who was the basketball coach at the time, his wife was a former Broadway actress. She was an adjunct professor, so she brought a perspective of acting that was great, and it just snowballed. And I ended up doing a few different productions, and it was very rewarding. When I think about my comfort getting in front of large groups of people and communicating, I often reflect back that if I hadn't done those things at Notre Dame, I probably wouldn't have the same level of confidence. There's a lot of people that are incredibly smart, incredibly talented, and they have this fear of actually getting up in front of small groups and large groups and communicating. And it definitely gave me the tools, the experience to be able to do it, and just how impactful words can be if you're thoughtful and have intent in how you put it all together.
So, and obviously this is a very high anxiety podcast, and you seem very comfortable, so it's served you well. In all seriousness, so you take over the CEO role at Wellspire 8 or 9 months before COVID.
Right.
So COVID comes to the U.S. shores, COVID comes to the U.S. markets, international markets. You just mentioned conquering fear, anxiety, calm in the face of very stiff headwinds. Like, how did you prioritize your battle plan and stay so calm under pressure? Because this was something, unless you were investing money in 1906, which you and I both were not, is new territory.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think it goes back to that idea that you can have a set of scripted plays. You can have what you think is going to happen, and then curveballs change. And COVID was a massive one. I think we would have probably struggled more in bringing Brofman, Rothschild, and Sontag together if we hadn't been so purposeful on the front end of assessing cultural and business fit, right? And that's always been, I've done a lot of M&A. I've been part of organizations that have been bought, sold. I've executed with a lot of really talented people on countless transactions. But our mandate is always, it's got to be the right cultural fit. It's got to be the right business fit. You have to be able to identify how the business combination is going to accrue to the benefit for clients and how it's going to increase professional development opportunities for your people.
Right.
So with that kind of foundation, we had to be nimble. We had to change. And I look at the industry now, and if you and I as leaders had said to our advisors, our service people, our general functional corporate leadership, everybody's going to get on video calls. The technology was there.
Right, that's right.
No one ever did it.
That's right.
You would have. They would have looked like you had three heads. If you said,
you're just lazy.
Going forward, everybody's going to be on video calls. Yet the technology was there, and necessity is the mother of invention, and we all adapted, and it became a critical part of how we communicated, how we built culture. I think that COVID also allowed us all to be a little bit more human. When you're on video calls and somebody's 3-year-old, son or daughter walks in the background, or their dog or cat, the barriers started that we all constructed. This is work and this is family, faded away. And I think we all became a little bit more human, vulnerable, and accessible. But I think part of it was constant communication. We talked
Right.
with each other. We found ways to engage, and that got us through it. And it was built off a foundation of, we were aligned in the way that we wanted to serve clients. We were aligned in being financial planning led. We were aligned in the cultures and the values that we had historically built. If we didn't have that foundation, I think it would have been a lot harder. But it was cathartic when we could actually physically bring people together. And I don't know if you remember, but there were fits and starts. Like you thought you were going to be able to start to get back in the office, and then all of a sudden we're pulled back out.
Another strand, another outbreak, and the absence of testing, and then what did it mean? And you're talking in a much more. We're in Leawood, Kansas here today, right? So we're a lot more. Social distancing was a lot easier here than it was in
New York City was different, and people getting on Long Island Railroad or New Jersey Transit or Metro North. It was different, but there was in hindsight, like it was horrific in terms of the human impact to people. And I never want to minimize that. But in a lot of ways, it forced the industry to evolve, use technology more, and little things like we run a significant internship program. Last year, we had close to 45 summer interns.
Oh, that's awesome.
Many are between their junior and senior years and undergraduate certified financial planning programs, but it's a little bit broader. And during COVID, we had a choice, cancel the internship program, and a lot of firms did that. We chose not to. We sent all the interns laptops, pivoted to a completely digital experience, and it forced our organization to standardize the program at the enterprise level. It actually accelerated, instead of every office having their unique version of what an internship program was, it became a truly enterprise, consistent program with still the local experience of your office when we were able to get back into the offices. So I try to look back and say, it was difficult and challenging and damaging in a lot of ways, but it also forced us to be nimble and evolve and get outside our collective and individual comfort zones. And it's made us better, I think more resilient.
Well, you're not the only one who thinks that, because in 2024, at the risk of embarrassing you, I do think it's noteworthy that Mike was voted the RIA Intel CEO of the Year. And if anyone's not aware, with the source of that award, it's given by Institutional Investor. It's an iconic publication in our industry. And just to give you an idea of the company Mike kept that year, the alternative asset manager of the year was Ares Management, and the non-alternative asset manager of the year was PIMCO. So I think I would say congratulations, a little delayed, but in recognition of the way you steered and led your organization through a really challenging time, all the while gathering assets to get to the tune of $580 billion. I think that's just awesome.
Well, look, I appreciate the kind words. The credit goes to the team, right? As somebody who's led organizations, the team you build is what enables you to have the success you have at the enterprise level, have the impact you have individually with clients. So I've been very fortunate to work with some amazing, talented people. When I look back at my career, and it is hard because sometimes I still feel like I'm the young, new guy, and you realize, okay, I've been in the industry, 3+ decades. I think the most rewarding thing is to see the development in people. When you take individuals and teams, and they were able to achieve more than they initially envisioned through the combination of culture and collaboration. I think that's the thing that's most rewarding. And when you can do it in an industry that is about having huge positive impact on the clients that we work with and allowing that to amplify, that's why I think I'm so evangelical about this industry. I don't think enough people understand how rewarding it is in terms of the opportunities to collaborate with super talented people. It's dynamic. I never wanted to be once I got exposed to the industry, I never wanted to be the deepest subject matter expert on a muni bond desk who knew everything about munis. And that's not a disservice to those people. They're valuable, but I wanted breadth. And I think in wealth management, that's what we live in every day. And it is being expansive in the way you think about helping people live lives of abundance and fulfillment and purpose. And you got to tap into those broad networks of subject matter experts in so many different verticals and be the person that coordinates it all. And if you do that, it's incredibly rewarding. You see the tangible impacts. I know a lot of our advisors say, my friends become my clients become my friends. And that speaks to the intimate relationships of trust that we establish. So, any opportunity I have to talk about the industry and how rewarding it is, I'm happy to do it.
I love the evangelization, Reverend LaMena, because I'm all in on that gospel. And I think you're 100% right. got to talk about two things within an outlook for the industry. Undeniable influence of technology. Okay, I'm interested in what WealthSpire is doing in that regard. In general, do you feel like you are leveraging tech to elevate rather than replace that human-centric planning? And then the second, which could dovetail from that first, is when you think about the well-known generational challenge, the aging advisor, right? That putting the next generation on the tee, right? And to your point, it can be a very widespread background that lends itself to areas of fulfillment within wealth management. But how are you positioning and maybe in lockstep with the technology to address not only the advisors that are transitioning out, but the beneficiaries of this phenomenal, whatever it is, 90 trillion, 120 trillion, 20 years, 30 years from now, there's going to be so much money that transfers to the next generation. How is WealthSpire and how do you see, inclusive of the technology, creating that next-gen advisor in your mold?
Yeah, so great questions. I'll tackle the technology and AI topic first and foremost. I do view it as an enabler and an empowerer of advisors, not a replacement. And I think it goes back to that idea that we're building deep, trusted relationships. You know, when we first started to get all this information on the medical side through WebMD and everything else online, people came to their doctor a lot more informed, but you still want to talk to an expert that you trust, an expert that you've worked with over an extended period of time. And I'm sure there are people that will say the agentic solutions will get to a place where they're just as... I'm not a believer of that because I believe when you have these major life events, people want a human connection. So in a world where there is so much distance through technology, I still think our industry is resilient in that it's built on deep human trusted relationships. Now, technology is a massive lever to help us be more productive, more efficient.
Right.
It should allow advisors to do what they do best, which is work with clients, and as a result, work with more clients. And there is a bull market for advice. People want guidance. You know, I think everybody thinks like so much information is available. Well, people want signal in the noise. People want an advisor to help guide them on that journey. You can have a lot of information, but you don't know the signal and the noise and the path, and you want that dialogue back and forth. So
I think they talk about these hallucinations. Hallucinations in AI. I feel like we get that, and I'm sure doctors did when clients or patients come in with WebMD printouts. But there are hallucinations in planning. Like this is my ideology. This is ideologically where I should be. All right, what other premise are you basing that ideology upon? Okay, that's faulty. And like that, I think creates.
And it is iterative, right?
Yes,
and it changes and it's dynamic. So I think our industry is resilient relative to that. I think the winners are going to be the ones that lean into the technology and find ways for it to make us more efficient, more effective, more impactful in the work we do with clients. And we're doing that. And we're working with all the top AI tools, but we're doing it through the lens of how do we continue to build deep, trusted relationships that allow us to have access to what matters most to clients.
Be enhanced.
Absolutely. I do, when you think about that generational gap, the forecast of how many advisors are going to retire and the looming gap in terms of advisors that are available, I think technology helps a little bit with that, because if every advisor that is in the industry gets 10%, 20%, 30% more productive, I think it expands the capacity. I don't think it solves it completely. I mentioned our internship program. We had over 15,000 people apply for our summer internship program this year.
For a 45-person class.
50-person class. And we remain committed to it. And I think it's easy for firms to say, all right, well, that entry-level advisor associate that used to sit in the client meeting and take the notes and synthesize it, we're just going to use AI to do that.
Right.
I worry that our internship program led into entry-level positions with a 5 to 6 year apprentice program to coach, develop people into next-gen advisors.
Okay.
Right, through practical experience, sitting in meetings, seeing the tears and the joy and all of the stuff that is the human part of our industry, as well as developing all the technical planning capabilities, the estate planning capabilities, the investment knowledge. We can't lose that, right? So technology has to be a lever, but we still have to create the space for those younger folks that enter the industry to learn from the best advisors in the industry in a way where they develop the skill sets, both EQ and IQ, to be successful advisors. So we don't have it all figured out, but I do worry that some people just think it's binary. Well, I don't need to hire entry-level positions anymore.
Right.
We're just going to use AI. Where does that leave you 3, 4, 5 years down the road when you're looking? And it's not just our industry. It's the legal industry, right? I don't need the first year, attorney anymore because AI is doing that. We have to stay focused on professional development if we want long-term resiliency in our people. And we're in a people-based business. You know that, Doug, right? The assets we have go in and out the door, up and down the elevators every single day. We don't have, tens of millions or billions of dollars invested in, factories. It's our people and the culture you create. So you got to invest in that.
That's exactly. No plant, property, and equipment. That's the book value, is the relationships without question in our industry, which I love. And I do think you're thinking about it the right way. And Mike Durbin was a guest on the podcast last month and talked about maybe not needing net new advisors because the capability of the retained advisor has expanded. Everyone talks about fee compression in our business. It's not that fees are being reduced. It's more that you're doing more for the same amount of compensation. 100%. I think that's going to be a trend that perpetuates. And I think about that next gen. It's tough. Like when we have clients that pass on or whose children take a larger role in their wealth and estate planning, it is challenging. And one of the things I really just thought I'd get a quick opinion of yours on is this whole gamification of finance, right? Whether it's meme stocks and 24-hour trading, obviously prediction markets are really, really big right now. Like, how are you guys even addressing that with your clients or even with your advisor team?
Yeah, I mean, it scares me, frankly, when I think about, because it's so disconnected from fundamentals, right? And, a lot of our advisors will say the highest impact they've had with clients over time is in periods of volatility, stress, keeping people focused on a long-term plan grounded in fundamentals. So I think part of what we're doing is education. Like we just rolled out a next-gen education program for the kids and the grandkids of our clients. And it's all about making sure that, yes, they can go to TikTok. Yes, they can go online. They can go to AI, and they're going to get a version of information. But how do we also give them a side of it that is through the lens of, thoughtful, long-term planning, fundamentals. So I think education is the key.
I love that. Build the foundation. Yeah. All right, Mike, I want to pivot now to some advice you might have for next generation of wealth advisors. And I would be remiss at this point if I did not express my gratitude to you and to WealthSpire for your awesome support of the inaugural Wealth Management Symposium on our Alma Mater's campus last November, and your energy enthusiasm for it's not next year, 6 months from now, for Symposium 2.0. So you were on an incredibly riveting panel last year, and you're going to be back on Under the Lights this year. So thank you for your
thank you for getting the whole thing started.
Oh,
it's just such an amazing event, and your leadership has been phenomenal.
Oh, it's been very fun to do. I've met some incredible people like yourself, and very rewarding just to be involved with these students that have aspirations to go into the industry. So along those lines, and I'm going to post this on the pod link when we put it up. But in February, the University of Notre Dame did a wonderful piece on Mike entitled "From Shakespeare to the C-Suites." We've covered both, which is kind of cool little gap we've bridged. But in that interview, you had a phenomenal quote, and I want to read it so I don't get it wrong. At the end of the day, it's not about having the most linear resume. It's about curiosity, courage, and values. Awesome. So for a Notre Dame student or young professional looking at their peers, like highly curated, like these iBanking consulting internships, what does a non-linear approach to building a career in wealth management actually look like in practice?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. And, from my perspective, I think so many young folks feel they have to have a linear progression in their career. I'm going to get this job and it's going to move to this promotion and this, and everything is laid out. And I think I've had a really rewarding career because I've listened to what I'm enjoying and been willing to take and make lateral moves, right? Mm-hmm. Or moves that some people might scratch their head. I shared earlier.
To the back office.
Yeah, people don't go from the front office to the back office, but I followed what my mind and heart were telling me I was getting satisfaction and joy out of doing. And I think that's made a huge difference when I look back over the course of my career. it was a big decision to leave a well-established firm. I mean, you've done similar things to go, independent. If you're willing to kind of really be reflective, it gives you a freedom to not feel like it has to be a linear progression, especially early on.
Right.
People get their first job, and maybe that's the job in the industry that you're going to want to be in for the rest of your life. Maybe not. But like if you find something intrigues you, gets you excited, you're learning about it, and it's creating satisfaction. Like I just tell people, explore that. And you and I know everything with technology is only accelerating.
That's right.
There are jobs that existed today that didn't exist 5 years ago, certainly didn't exist 10 years ago. You look at the evolution of our industry and the scale and the independent wealth side. You can lean into that dynamicism by, exploring new possibilities and having that inner dialogue about what's giving you joy and satisfaction versus what's not. Don't get locked in, well, I have to take the next promotion or I have to. And you and I talked with a number of Notre Dame students about that, even in thinking about wealth management.
Right.
There are people that absolutely know they want to go into investment banking, and it will be a great career for them. But there's a multiplicity of opportunities. That's right. And, be open to those possibilities. Because I think growth occurs when you get outside that comfort zone, and it's less a linear progression and more, a collage of experiences.
Oh, I love that image.
I think the piece about values is that's the thing that I think is consistent, right? If you know who you are, and Notre Dame does a phenomenal job of establishing that foundation of values. That's the stuff that's non-negotiable. And if you have that foundation, then exploring the other things, I think, becomes a creative process to figure out what's highest and best use, what gives you joy. And that can evolve over time. So,
well, don't you feel, and I know this is a biased perspective, but Notre Dame students, just given this expectation of high character, high ethics, strong communication capability, they just seem so properly aligned with the industry. And even if you come in, look, I was a marketing major when I came to Notre Dame, and I was only a marketing major because my wife, who sadly wasn't my girlfriend at the time, said she was going to be a marketing major. Like, well, that sounds great, so I'll be a marketing major. I had no earthly idea what I wanted to do. And you just put yourself into the path of opportunity, be open-minded, and I just fell in love with the energy of the industry and knew I had to get into it. But prior to coming to campus, I had no prior exposure. So I do think that Notre Dame kids help in the hiring process because so much of hiring is about risk management. Right? Reduce that risk. We know you got a great education. Reduce that risk. We know you have a high ethical standard. Reduce that risk. We're making this presumption of integrity. So when we're back on campus in November, I'm super fired up to engage with more students as we continue to curate this track to getting them launched into the industry. And along those lines, and you may have already covered this because you mentioned your introduction to Morgan Stanley was by a former roommate.
Yeah.
But we all talk about the power of the Notre Dame network. And my wife and I are both 93 grads. We contend to this day Notre Dame means more to us every year we're out. And we just see the way that it has permeated so many aspects of our life. Having a son go there just even further magnified that. But do you have a good Notre Dame network example of someone either you helped or someone that helped you in your professional path?
It's too many to talk about. It's everywhere. And Mike Durbin, who was your guest on episode 1, I worked together with him at Morgan Stanley. He went to Fidelity and was running their advisor business. And there's countless times in my career where I've just sought him out to say, I like your perspective on this. I love that. I think that's the thing about the network. Just have conversations. Right. You're passionate about this industry. I am. Anybody wants to have a conversation, I'm open to it.
Right.
And it doesn't, and it's not about the outcome. I think it's more about just sharing our perspective.
Right.
But seek it out, start the conversations. I think over the course of a career, you're really collecting experiences and skill sets. And coming into this industry, there's so many backgrounds. You're an accounting major, you're a marketing major, you worked in investment banking, you worked in psychology, right? All of those things bring a unique skill set to an industry where you have to have kind of breadth of knowledge and breadth of experience and that IQ and EQ. So.
Yeah, I love that. And it is funny because the EQ is undeniably trumping the IQ as it relates to the proportion of the skill set on a daily basis, we certainly of our capital we bring to the table, we're so reliant now on the enhanced technological aspects of the IQ that allow us to have scale and bandwidth to keep the setting and our equity intimate so that we do still preserve the internal culture. Because ultimately the client's going to benefit the happier we are in performing the duties they've hired us to perform.
Yeah, and you got to lean into that human side of it.
Oh
right?
my gosh,
because
100%.
the technology's ability to give you the technical answer relative to financial planning or estate planning is only going to accelerate at tremendous pace. What I don't think it can replace is, I've known you as a client.
Right.
I know your family. I know what matters to you. I know the ups and the downs and all that stuff. And I can ask the right questions to provoke, the dialogue that leads to real discovery.
That's right.
We're all on a journey. And I think, relationships are the connective tissue that, go along with that.
I love it. All right, pal. So we are now 2 segments left in this podcast episode.
Oh, it's getting real.
It's getting real. Well, this will really test your nerves.
All right.
We're going to go embark on something called the lightning round.
All right.
Okay. The lightning round, I'm just going to pose a number of different choices, framed as either or.
Okay.
And the goal is to help our audience further understand a little bit more of how you think.
Okay.
And how you see the world. It is a psychoanalysis, but there's not a single doctor or psychologist with any credentials that would ever actually claim to extract any relevant data. But it's fun. So when you're ready, just don't think lightning.
I'm ready.
Okay, you ready? Okay.
All right.
Rays or famous original Rays?
Famous original Rays.
Rocco's or Barnaby's?
Rocco's.
Hudson River or East River?
Hudson.
St. Mary's Lake or St. Joseph's Lake?
St. Mary's.
Wall Street Journal or New York Post?
Wall Street Journal, definitely.
Observer or Scholastic?
Observer.
Yankees or Mets?
Yankees. I did a year of volunteer work in the Bronx just when they were on their ascendancy.
Yes,
I didn't
that's
have a
true.
choice.
The high point of the Jeter years.
Yep.
Nets or Knicks?
Knicks.
Big night tonight. Rangers or Islanders?
Islanders. I'm a little bit, divided. Usually it's, aligned, but
Shakespeare or Sophocles?
Shakespeare.
Denbrock or Ash?
Let's go Denbrock.
Okay. Let's put this in. Let's see what we got here, Mike.
What does it tell me?
Okay, so the SNAP assessment tool tells us you're someone who is fiercely loyal to their roots, loves the gritty underdogs over the flashy favorites, boasts a strong Long Island identity, and pairs a sharp, tragically classic intellect with a deep love for a great slice of pizza and a lockdown defensive game. Not sure where that came from. So I was awesome. So thank you. That's good stuff.
That's great.
And
I
then
survived first aspect of the lightning round.
Well, there's nothing like New York pizza, right?
Yeah,
and for anyone who's been to New York, they know the joke between Rays, famous original Rays, famous Rays. There's actually a really neat history that kind of ties it all together.
I thought you were going to go New York or Chicago or New York,
Chicago,
Detroit.
Yeah.
That would have been a bigger test because I did spend
dish,
7.5 years working in Chicago.
Good point. Good point. And you're Italian, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So have you been to Chow's in South Bend?
I have not.
Oh my gosh, you got to go. Shout out to Adele, who's the proprietor. Best brajol in the Midwest.
All right.
I've never tasted anything like it since it was in my grandmother's kitchen as a young Italian boy. I'm an old Italian boy, but they cater as well as have a fantastic restaurant and bakery in downtown South Bend. So if you've not been to Chow's, go. It's amazing. And then we're going to wrap up the podcast with something we just call the final.
Okay.
So 2 quick questions. We'll leave the audience with your final thoughts. Number 1, what do you do outside of work to stay sharp, stay active, and challenge yourself? We talked a lot about the challenges inside the office, but what about outside the office?
Well, this is an interesting one because I feel like, I think I've had 3 daughters that were 3.5 years apart, and they were all super involved in sports. So a lot of weekends were filled with relentless gauntlets of soccer games and basketball games and lacrosse games and track meets. And so I'm actively in pursuit of a hobby.
Okay.
So, I'll have to get back to you on that
Okay.
one. A lot of family, love to ski,
Great.
Which is, I think, a great family activity. But yeah, I'm kind of looking for those. Okay, now all the nest is almost empty.
Okay.
What are the next chapter hobbies?
Well, it'd be fun to see where you land, because you obviously have a very wide array of interests.
My wife was pushing pickleball. We did a couple clinics, and I dove a few times. And there seemed to be a perception that maybe my competitive commit was a little aggressive for a clinic. So we'll see.
Yeah, interesting. And then you're an English major. You were an English major. So, and I, again, doubt you had I assume you had very little free time before, but what was your favorite book you've ever read of any genre, subject matter, time period, anything?
Favorite book ever? That's a difficult one. There's so many over time. I don't know that I could pick a single one.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair.
I did recently read Will Guidara's Unreasonable.
Oh, phenomenal book.
Hospitality, and I think they're so relevant to our industry and where that's
Incredibly
going.
so.
I think I'm a broad connoisseur of literature, so hard to peg just one.
Understand. Awesome.
If you ask me country music artist, I'd say Chris Stapleton.
Okay, we'll take it. He's coming to Kansas City this July, so come on back.
All right.
And Mike, again, thank you so much for being here. Really enjoyed the time. You're a true professional. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you like the pod, give it a like, subscribe, and until next time, which will be next month, go Irish.